everyone, and welcome back to the Journey of Now. And today, Karis and I have been just sitting with a couple of ideas on just where we'd like to take this conversation, because there's been so many incredible themes that have risen up, be it from...
What do you mean? I mean, we've had non-stop conversations for the last, so how do we sift through?
Yeah, my brain's tired.
What we've spoken about, what we've shared? Because obviously, there's these things that we're moving through as individuals, then in our unit as a family, what we're moving through, but also on a collective level, what we've seen with our clients. And so to sift through what to speak about that. So we'll talk and we'll see. We have an intention to share about, what was it that you wanted to share about control?
It's the 2 blog posts I've been writing, and that was the easiest way, this looking at what I've been sharing in words with some of the blog posts that I've been writing, and that's been inspired not only by my clients at this moment in time, but just also, some steps that I've had to take in my own journey. And today I'd like to start on the archetype of the necessary hero, and what that is exactly, and how you may have found yourself in that space having to pick up all the pieces for everyone else all the time because it was just thrown onto your shoulders and no one else was willing to do it. No one else was willing to take those steps and take some form of accountability and really step in as not just the role as the parent, but the role as the responsible human in whatever experience you may have been going through during that period of time.
So when we look at what childhood neglect and childhood trauma and parental trauma and all of that, what that means in terms of how you operate as an adult, you obviously need to understand it, but also it's about widening the lens, because we've only looked at it from the lens of, oh, we have trauma and this is how it sits in the system. But when we are children, our brains are literally sponges. We are the most dependent and technically the most helpless and vulnerable when we're children. And that's where we accumulate most of our trauma. And so when our caretakers have these conditions that you have to do certain things in order to be safe and loved, or that, you're unworthy of having people be kind to you and respect you because you're a child, that's when you learn to continuously abandon yourself. So when we're speaking about the necessary hero archetype, that's just one aspect of the wounded child and how that plays out in adulthood. So it's basically the aspect of ourselves from where you're reacting. It's also where that need to control comes from. It's also, and there's different modalities and there's different perspectives on things, and they all are true to us in one sense where, there's one modality, Buddhism and Zen, that will talk to how control isn't here. It does live in the mind, because there's something that comes up in the mind where it's like, okay, where you're reacting from in terms of like, I need to control this in order to be... It does start in the mind, but when that pattern is activated, like a whole response system and so we also have to acknowledge the somatic response that happens. The mind leads, but the body goes. And so we have to look at it as a whole instead of thinking that these things are separate. So when you're acting from that whole wounded archetype aspect, the wounded child is someone that has a very deep-seated fear in the world around you. You feel very misunderstood by other people. There's definitely low self-esteem, a low level of self-worth, because that's been damaged by your caregivers over a while, and it's been neglected.
And just something that rose up when I was putting that together was looking at how we carry the weight of the world on our shoulders to validate the love that we receive.
Yeah.
So it really starts tying into this people-pleasing aspect or mechanism that we develop, because firstly, our parents or our caregivers, throw us into a position where we have to take complete responsibility and accountability for their inaction and their unwillingness to do what they need to do to support the household. And typically what you'll start seeing, and I want to share just from what I've experienced within my clients, is it's normally the eldest child.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir, yeah, Ned.
Well, it is normally the eldest child, and it's the child that's now, you've got to make sure that your brothers and sisters are going to bed, or maybe one of your parents pass away and you have the ability to start working, or your parents are unable to emotionally regulate themselves, so you are essentially walking on eggshells, pleasing everyone according to their, very specific perspective and needs and ideals. So then you start, your people pleasing is basically changing masks or changing caps with every person that you are interacting with in the household to make sure that there is no volatility, so everyone else's needs are met.
So there's that hypervigilance. And
yes.
Even when you break it down further, it's not just even that. I mean, that's where the need to control stems from, because somewhere it was cemented in that when you are controlling things in terms of when you've made sure that everyone else is taken care of, okay, that the narrative somehow is better. And this is something that I did for a long time, there's a whole book, what is it, Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents.
Yes.
It was wildly validating, but at the same time, it is such a good read for you to understand where these things come from, because to understand the effect of what you don't even know that you're carrying these things in adulthood. You think sometimes, oh, it's just anxiety, or it's just that, or oh, I'm just lazy, or oh, I'm just no. Some way this belief was set in. And a lot of the times, especially with my work in autoimmune and how these diseases show up in the body space, is that a lot of the times you'll find it difficult to let go of pain and hurt that you've experienced as a child. What will happen is when you are in a household where you have emotionally immature adult parents, okay, they will either at very little times take accountability for or responsibility for what has happened. And there's this part of you that's like, I just want to be seen and I just want to be heard. And so when those things get stuck in the body, you'll find like people who hold these things are very prone to suffering from either some sort of like psychological disorder, whether it's clinical depression or whatever, but there's also pain disorders, because there's some part that identifies with this like wounding and illness on some level. And I'm speaking from my own experience. I was diagnosed with lichen planus and lichen sclerosis, and it's a visual illness, if that makes sense. It's not something that you can hold on the inside. It's your hairline, your skin, everything is affected. And when I took that apart, there was this part of me that was like, I just want to be seen. I want to be heard. I want someone to take accountability for what they did and they didn't do.
And just adding to what you're saying on that, it's this thing of you've lived an entire life upon other people's narratives. It's all been hedged upon their narratives. Your entire foundation, your existence is built upon the ideals, the expectations, the assumptions of everyone else's needs. And then you get to a point where you become an adult at a younger age. But when you do become an adult and you do have the title of I am 18 or 22 or 26, whenever you're fully developed, whatever you want to call that, when you then reach that point, you do not know who you are. You do not know what you like. You do not know what desires you have, because right now you are literally the embodiment or the product of the environment that you grew up in. And all you know is to meet everyone else's needs. And here's the funniest thing. And here's a hypothetical situation which relates to a couple of my clients. Imagine that you have, imagine that you started a business at, let's say, 17, 18, and you grew up in maybe a moderate household or a household that was under the average means, and you became the sole breadwinner. You had to break through. You had to be that one. You had to be that one person in your family that was going to take it upon themselves to literally shift the paradigm. And so you become that one person that literally shifts the entire paradigm for your family, for your lineage. And you're still then carrying the weight that you are so accustomed to carrying. But now you've also built a business on top of that. And so you micromanage in your business. You follow the same mechanics of, I have to make sure everyone else's needs are met. And now you move from working on your business to working in your business. And you hire people. You do all these things to expand and grow and meet ROI and, increase your bottom line. But the amount of pressure and overwhelm that is created through this incessant need to control.
Did we not have the conversation the other day where I shared with you, your business is not a part of your personality?
Yes.
This is something that Nick has had to actively work through in terms of being able to switch off from the business.
Yep.
Being able to live like your daily, just the life in your day without bringing that in, and like being able to switch off and rest from it. And this is something that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, but it's also which part of you is reacting in order that need to control, that whole need to be busy and have to like manage every aspect, because there's very little of that process that is in your control when you do realize it and when you see it. But I'd also, if you're listening to this, for you to understand where this also stems from, and so you can also understand the context of what like our life has been to an extent. And I'd really like to speak to that. So for me, I am the eldest daughter. I've got two younger brothers. I know my parents did the best that they could, and they do love us, but every parent, no matter how much you love, they love you, is going to bring in some trauma. My mother was both my parents were very emotionally absent, and so I had to take on that role as like caregiver for my brothers to an extent. And for you were an only child with a single mother, and you take on the role of, in that whole era, it was like being man of the house.
Basically being husband and adult.
Yeah.
To be being the husband and the adult in that mix, and you're taking on these responsibilities, but you do not have, you're forced to mature emotionally and assess risks and forecast, which are great skill sets, by the way, and strategize and notice nuances. And so
great skills, yes, but for a child, is it necessary?
No, it is not. What this results in, you are trying to control the uncontrollable. You're trying to control life. The net result is you are unable to live. Everything has to be premeditated, pre-planned, pre-thought of. All boxes need to be checked before an action can be taken. And even then, it is all thought, because emotionally you are absent from yourself, because you are just this mechanical function going through life, because this is how you do it. This is the way you move from point A to point.
How do you recognize the whole archetype of the necessary hero? Because you can see it and smell it in people. Like,
to say no. People pleasing.
Yeah.
Need for control. People pleasing comes through the need to control. When someone says, you can't, like, and you don't even need to say this. Let's say you were making a cup of tea, for example.
Yeah.
And I came in and said, no, don't worry, I'll do it for you. I'll help you. Or you're busy, no, don't worry, I'll help you. Or you're doing this. I'm trying to control your narrative so you don't need to inconvenience yourself, and I can accrue validation from that. Oh, you're being a great help. Or in business, you get to a point where someone isn't performing as per your expectations, so you take on their role even though you hired them to perform a specific function. And what is the net result of all of this? Burnout, overwhelm.
That's what I was going to say.
Frustration, anger, resentment. And now you're done. You're spent. You're physically sick. You're tired. You're fatigued. And now you're asking, I don't have time for my family. I don't have time for this. I don't have capacity to do this. I'm just tired. I don't have any creativity. Why? Because you are running this mechanic. This entire process is running your life. What is the net effect? How is that working out for you? That's the question that I want to throw in just for a moment. How is that working out for you? And maybe it may not be to the same degree for you, but if you notice a mechanic like this in your life, how is that working out for you? How much living are you doing?
Not very much. But the thing with the necessary hero archetype is that this is the only way perhaps you know how to give and receive love, is the thing of constantly doing and everybody seeing how happy you are in that. And then we've spoken to this with the whole depression archetype as well. But this is what happens when you're a child that's been forced to take on more responsibility than you're ready for. And what's behind the whole archetype of the necessary hero, there's a book by Dr. Nicole Pera called How to Do the Work, and she speaks more to this. But what's behind it is the absentee caretaker. It doesn't necessarily don't have a mother or a father that's there, but someone if they're not there emotionally, you're also forced to step up and fill that role. There's a premature maturity, and most often than not, it's either the only child or the eldest sibling that has to step up into this. And it does come with a sense of responsibility, especially if you come from a very dysfunctional or household. Sure. And when everyone is volatile, then you feel that the level of emotional regulation in the house is your responsibility. So as an example to speak to that, I think I spoke to you about it the other day, when my mother was very consumed in what she was moving through. And I thought by taking on most of the responsibilities with my brothers, that it would make things easier, which means that she would have more to give to us. And then when my father would come home, I'd play the role of
the good daughter.
Yeah, the good girl, and make things easy and make tea and chat and all the things. Because if he was in a good mood and my mother wasn't worried about having to take care of us, then there would be more room for the love and affection that we actually needed. And I didn't even do that to give to myself. It was more so that my brothers would receive that. And if I knew that they were taken care of, then I did my job.
It took a burden off you.
Exactly. And so that pattern continued into adulthood until I got really sick and my body was like, fuck no, babe, we can't do this.
And then you figured out that word, that no.
Boundaries. Oh, that wonderful.
Word with a full stop, that full sentence, that book close and the chapter end.
Wonderful, wonderful words. So the other things that go with the necessary hero is the overachievement and then this loss of self. Because you don't really know what to do for yourself. You don't really want to explore what you really want, because you have to take on everyone else's expectations so that you don't unsettle anyone.
Yes.
And then all of that, what does that equate to? Burnout and exhaustion. And then eventually illness. And so what is it that you'd like to speak to when it comes to this whole archetype and control?
You know what, I think we've touched on where it started and how it manifests in our lives, and looking at the mechanic. And I'm using that word with the intention for you to see it for what it is, because it is a mechanic. We're not going to call it conditioning. We're not going to call it anything else. It is something that you can change, and it will just take conscious effort to do so. If you are seeing it now, or maybe this is the first time, or maybe this is just reaffirming that this is something that has been a part of you, which it may feel like it. And it could feel like you're learning to walk again when you realize this or see it. But the intention with all of this is, we create a prism within ourselves, how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive reality, and all the conditions that need to be held within this prison to maintain some form of order.
Oh, well, I mean, the illusion of order.
Well, the illusion of order, sure. But life happens outside of the walls of that prison, outside of order. There is natural order. And it is just as important to realize that we really do not have control. And this entire system that so many of us are living by, it really doesn't have any merit. There's nothing that it can build itself upon or hold itself to other than the illusion that this is the only way that we can exist. Because just as you sit here listening to this in this moment, you do not control your breath. You do not control that next beat in your heart. You are not in control of the millions of processes that are happening moment to moment to moment in your field, in your body.
And it's the same thing as if you were a gardener and you thought you were in control of how deep those roots penetrate, how many leaves come
And
off
the
of the
wind.
plant. Exactly. You can only control how much you water the plant and whether you put it in sunlight or not. Beyond that, that's none of your business.
So the medicine, if we're going to give you a little bit of a script here today, would be trust. Trust and let go of what you can. And a simple practice that I ascribe to so many of my clients is get a pen and paper, draw a line in the middle, and start with something very practical, other than now this mechanic which could possibly bring things up in your space. And draw a line on your left-hand side, you write as a heading, control, and on the other side, things that I do not control. And you write down all the things that you can control. And you can actually look at actionable tasks and things that you can do. But then the result of those tasks may not happen immediately and may take time to manifest within your reality. And the things that you cannot control, just let that go. Let go of the immediate, let go of the unnecessary weight that you may be carrying just through living or in your business or in your household or even mentally. Be it thoughts, be it actions, be it emotions, be it sensations. Just let go of what you cannot control. And you might ask, so how do I do that? It is a conscious choice. Focus on what you can do and nothing more, nothing less.
I think we'll have to do another one on control and the illusion of control. I think perhaps I have a way more radical approach to it, but when you have been on the extreme of the other end. So what I'd like to just also read to you, I wrote a book a while ago on trauma and how it manifests in the body, but also how to move through it in a way where it doesn't hold you prisoner. But one of the archetypes, so we've gone through the whole thing of the necessary hero archetype, but the trauma response that it comes from, we know about the flight response, we know about fight and fawn and all of that, but what we don't hear too often spoken about is the trauma hybrid. And so for the necessary hero archetype, there's this trauma hybrid called the fawn flight type. And I just wanted to read a little excerpt from that, which is, it's the workaholic who makes herself useful. So the fawn flight is the most exhausted combination, which is trying to escape and outrun our pain by doing, with an underlying need to anticipate and perhaps even manage the needs of others. And you may have started to notice cycles of intense self-sacrifice followed by the need to free yourself and start over. So starting over becomes a new project, which initially feels good, but that might be the flight part kicking in. And then in relationships, it's this tendency to understand and accommodate the needs of others at the expense of sharing your true self. And it can feel disconnecting, and there's a sense of deep sadness that no one ever looks after you. And so, I mean, it goes deeper than that, but it's very much this whole busyholic parent. So you can see it in someone. So if they give the example of like a nurse or an administrative assistant who works from dawn until bedtime, providing the needs of the business, but then goes home and then has to provide for the needs of the household. And there has this compulsive need to take everything else with hardly like a gesture towards your own needs. And it's very much this like misguided Mother Teresa type caregiver. So it's distancing themselves from their own pain with the obsessive compulsive rushing from one person to the next or from one thing to the next. So it's not about what you have to learn in terms of shifting the perspective on this is that caring is not about fixing. That you can want people to eat really well, but you don't have to fix their plate for them. And so it is looking at what is in the scope of your role and responsibility and what isn't. Exactly what you said about making that list. It's just giving yourself as well that empathy, acceptance, and an opportunity to feel safe in that. And give yourself time, because this archetype has been there for a very long time. It's not something that you can fix in like 3 months, and it's something that unravels, and sometimes I'll still find myself.
You'll find yourself in the patterns. You'll find yourself in that system, because that system at some point in time was how you expressed all that you knew how to express. It was the only way you...
For sure. So, I mean,
That's how you exist.
Yeah.
Actually, how you existed and functioned in life.
There's a whole video on addiction and the patterns behind addiction, and how children literally feel that if they don't get love and affection, that they're going to die. And so, and babies will. Eventually babies will die if they don't get that.
Yep.
And so why do we in adulthood think that we're any different from what we've come from? And a lot of the times you'll find, like, I mean, even my clients who've had binge eating disorders, there's something in you that is never going to be satisfied. So it doesn't matter how much you eat. It doesn't matter how much you do. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter how many...
It doesn't matter what your life looks like on paper. What ideals you've met, which are not even your own.
Until you learn what that is, where it comes from, it's going to feel like this black hole that is swallowing you whole. And there's not enough food or alcohol or anything that is going to satiate that. So, I mean, the balm for that, in terms of how I've learned to heal that, it's constantly in this space of unshedding the things that I've learned to carry with that, is give yourself that validation and acceptance. Okay. Really just repeating to yourself, and I have to say this on a daily as well, like, everyone is an adult, and it is not my responsibility to look after that for them. Yeah. Besides, obviously not for my children, because that's literally my responsibility. But for you as my partner, there's things I have to be like, no, Nick's an adult. I don't have to do that. And it's the same thing on my end, where he's also like, no, she's an adult. I don't have to do that.
So it comes down to no longer outsource your validation and affirming yourself for yourself, because that's no one else's responsibility in this now moment other than yours.
Radical responsibility will save your life, because your partner is not your caretaker. You don't get married for a step-in mother. Well, some people do, but like that's what I wanted to talk about today. But yeah.
But I hope that this found you, and this met you, and this really provoked some thoughts and feelings, and that there's something that you can take out of this and apply to your life. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for sharing the space with us. Genuinely, from the bottom of our hearts, I hope you have a beautiful week. Sending you lots of love, lots of light, and don't forget to be present in the journey of your now.